There is a certain kind of story that stays with you. It's the kind that doesn't have an ending, a puzzle with a missing piece. These are the cold cases. They are whispers from the past, tales of lives cut short and questions left hanging in the air, unanswered for years, sometimes for decades. Why do they hold such power over us? Or is it something deeper? A desire to see the scales of justice, however slowly, finally find their balance. These stories are more than just dusty files in a police station, they are promises waiting to be kept. These lingering questions haunt families, of course, but they also haunt the communities where the darkness fell. People remember. They wonder. Could it happen again? But then, something happens. A flicker of light in the darkness. A new technology emerges, something no one could have dreamed of all those years ago. A forgotten piece of evidence is re-examined. And just like that, the cold case isn't so cold anymore. We are going to look back at some of those whispers. 5 stories that seem destined to remain mysteries forever. We will travel across the country through different decades to uncover how dogged police work and incredible scientific breakthroughs finally brought closure. And justice, even when it is delayed, is a powerful thing to witness. It began in the mid-1970s, a creeping terror that spread across California. It started with burglaries, small invasions of privacy, but soon it grew into something far more sinister. A man, a shadow, would break into homes in the dead of night. He was a phantom who tormented his victims, his crimes escalating in violence and brutality. The police called him the East Area Rapist. Then the attacks turned to murder, and he became known as the original Night Stalker. For more than a decade he held the entire state in a grip of fear. The scale of his crimes was staggering. He was linked to at least 13 murders, more than 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries from Sacramento to Orange County. Imagine the terror. You lock your doors, you check your windows, but you know it might not be enough. The police had descriptions, they had his method of operation, and they had his DNA from crime scenes. But that DNA matched no one in their databases. It was a genetic fingerprint without a person attached. And then in 1986 he just stopped. The attacks ended, but the mystery and the fear remained. Then came the breakthrough. It came from a new kind of investigation using genetic genealogy. Investigators took the killer's DNA profile and uploaded it to a public genealogy website, the kind people use to trace their family trees. They weren't looking for him, they were looking for his relatives. They found a distant cousin, then another and another. Slowly, painstakingly, they built a family tree that led them not to a monster, but to a man. An ex-cop named Joseph James D'Angelo. In 2018, police arrested the 72-year-old grandfather. The shadow finally had a face. Justice came in 2020 when D'Angelo pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The ghost was finally caught. In 1990, a young woman was found on the side of a highway in Oklahoma City. She was badly injured and died a few days later in the hospital. She was beautiful, smart, and kind, according to those who met her briefly. But who was she? The man who claimed to be her husband, a man named Clarence Hughes, was with her. He told a strange story, but his story didn't add up. After her death, he vanished. The woman was buried without a name. For years she was known simply as a Jane Doe. Her life, her story, her identity, all of it was a complete mystery. The man, Clarence Hughes, was not who he said he was. His real name was Franklin Delano Floyd, a lifelong violent criminal with a long and terrifying history. Investigators eventually tracked him down, but he refused to identify the woman. The mystery only deepened. The case took a bizarre and tragic turn. Investigators discovered that Floyd had also kidnapped the woman's young son, Michael, from his elementary school years earlier. Floyd claimed Michael was his son, but he refused to say where the boy was. He was convicted of the kidnapping, but Michael was never seen again. Decades later, in 2014, a breakthrough finally came from DNA. Investigators were able to connect the deceased woman's DNA to relatives who had been searching for a lost family member. Her name, they learned, was not Tanya, the name Floyd had given her. Her real name was Suzanne Savakis. Floyd had kidnapped her as a little girl, raised her as his own daughter under the alias Sharon Marshall, and later forced her to marry him. He was not her husband, he was her kidnapper and abuser. After a lifetime of stolen identity, her true name was restored. Floyd was later executed for a separate murder. Though the fate of her son Michael remains unknown, Suzanne Savakis finally got her name back. Justice in this case was giving a lost soul her story back. For over 2 decades, a predator haunted the streets of South Los Angeles. He targeted vulnerable women, many of whom were struggling with addiction and poverty. His reign of terror began in the mid-1980s, and he was methodical and merciless. He would shoot his victims, often with a small caliber pistol, and dump their bodies in alleys and dumpsters hidden away from the world. The police knew they had a serial killer on their hands, one who was preying on a community that often felt overlooked. But finding him was like searching for a needle in a haystack. He was a ghost, leaving a trail of death but few clues to his identity. The killer earned a chilling nickname, the Grim Sleeper. This was because there was a long gap in his crimes, a period of about 14 years, from 1988 to 2002, when it seemed he had stopped. Then, in the early 2000s, the killings started again. The same method, the same type of victim. The nightmare had returned. The community was terrified and also angry. Many felt that because the victims were poor, black women, the case was not given the attention it deserved. The break, when it finally came, was thanks to a new technique called a familial DNA search. In 2010, they got a hit. The DNA belonged to the son of a man named Lonnie Franklin Jr., a former mechanic and city sanitation worker. They got a sample of his DNA from a discarded piece of pizza. It was a perfect match to the DNA from the crime scenes. The Grim Sleeper was a 57-year-old father living in the very neighborhood he had terrorized. In 2016, Lonnie Franklin Jr. was convicted of 10 murders and sentenced to death. A city's long nightmare was finally over. The city of Wichita, Kansas, lived under a cloud of fear for 30 years. It all started way back in 1974 with the brutal murder of 4 members of the Otero family. The killer left behind no witnesses and, honestly, just a few clues. But then, he did something incredibly bold. He wrote a letter to a local newspaper, taking credit for the crime. In the letter, he gave himself a name that would become, basically synonymous with terror, BTK. It stood for his method: bind, torture, kill. He was not just a murderer, he was a performer who craved attention. He wanted the world to know about his terrible work, and he controlled the narrative of fear in his city. For the next 3 decades, BTK would play this chilling cat-and-mouse game with the police and the media. He would kill, then go silent for years at a time, leaving the community to wonder if he was gone for good. Then, a letter would appear. Or maybe a package containing a victim's driver's license, or even a poem about the crime. He was taunting them, reminding everyone that he was still out there, hiding in plain sight. He claimed responsibility for 10 murders between 1974 and 1991. The police had his letters, they had his chilling descriptions of the crimes, but they did not have his face or his name. He was a phantom who lived inside their heads. The case went cold for more than a decade after his last known murder in 1991. It really seemed like BTK had finally retired, or just disappeared. He became a dark legend in Wichita, a boogeyman whose story was told in hushed tones. The police, led by Lieutenant Ken Landwehr, never gave up. They kept the case alive, hoping that one day, the killer would make a mistake. In 2004, he did. After 13 years of silence, BTK sent another letter to the media, angry that his story was being forgotten. He continued to communicate, and in one fateful message he asked the police a question. Could he send them a floppy disk without being traced? The police, wanting him to feel safe, placed an ad in the newspaper saying it would be fine. He sent the disk. And on that disk, investigators found hidden metadata, a digital breadcrumb. It led them to a computer at Christ Lutheran Church and to a man named Dennis Rader. Rader was the church council president, a Boy Scout leader, a husband, and a father. He was also BTK. In 2005, Dennis Rader confessed to his crimes and was sentenced to life in prison. The boogeyman was just a man and his game was over. In February of 1957, a young boy's body was found in a cardboard box in a wooded area of Philadelphia. He was small, between 4 and 6 years old, with blonde hair and blue eyes. He was malnourished and showed signs of past abuse. But who was he? No one came forward to claim him. No missing person reports seemed to match his description. The police were stumped. They put his picture on posters and in newspapers across the country. They called him America's unknown child. The entire city of Philadelphia seemed to embrace this lost little boy, but no one could give him the one thing he needed most: his name. The investigation was one of the largest in the city's history. Detectives followed thousands of leads, interviewing people across the country. They looked into orphanages, foster homes, and hospitals. They chased down rumors and theories, some plausible, some wild, but every lead turned into a dead end. The case file grew, but the boy's identity remained a mystery. He was buried in a potter's field with a tombstone that read, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." His case became a national obsession, a symbol of all the lost and forgotten children. Years turned into decades. The boy's body was exhumed twice, once in 1998 and again in 2019, to extract DNA as technology improved. But the DNA didn't match anyone in the existing databases. It was another dead end. Volunteers and amateur sleuths dedicated their lives to solving this one case. They created websites, shared information, and never gave up hope. For 65 years, the boy in the box was a ghost, a face on a poster, a question mark at the heart of a city's history. It seemed his story would never have a beginning. Then, in late 2022, the impossible happened. Using the same advanced genetic genealogy that caught the Golden State Killer, investigators finally found a match. They built a complex family tree using the boy's DNA and were able to identify his birth mother. From there, they found his birth certificate. The boy in the box had a name. He was Joseph Augustus Zarelli. He was born in 1953. For the first time in over 6 decades, he was no longer America's unknown child. He was Joseph. While the circumstances surrounding his death are still under investigation, giving him his name back was a profound act of justice. A city's promise to a little boy was, at long last, fulfilled. There is a quiet hero in many of these stories. It isn't a detective or a witness, it's science. For decades, the only tools investigators had were fingerprints, shoe prints, and good old-fashioned police work. They relied on what they could see and what people would tell them. Evidence was collected and stored, of course. A bloodstain on a carpet, a hair found on a coat, a bit of skin under a victim's fingernail. For years, this evidence would sit in storage, silent and waiting. It held the truth, but we didn't yet have the language to understand what it was saying. The secrets were locked away at a molecular level. Then came the DNA revolution. Suddenly, that silent evidence could speak. A single cell could tell a story, providing a genetic fingerprint that was unique to one person on the entire planet. This changed everything. Cold cases that had been dormant for decades were suddenly alive with possibility. Evidence from old crime scenes was pulled from storage and retested. In some cases, investigators found a match in a criminal database, and a case that was cold for 20 years was solved in an afternoon. But what happened when the DNA didn't match anyone in the system? The next great leap was genetic genealogy. This was a game changer, the key that unlocked the coldest of the cold cases, like that of the Golden State Killer and the boy in the box. It was a brilliant new way of thinking. Instead of looking for an exact match, investigators used public DNA websites to look for a relative, a cousin, a great aunt, anyone who shared a piece of the genetic puzzle. From there, it was like being a historian of a family. They would build family trees, tracing branches back in time and then forward again, until they narrowed the possibilities down to one person. It was meticulous, painstaking work that combined cutting-edge science with old-school genealogy research. This powerful tool represents more than just a new technique. It represents a fundamental shift in the balance between hiding and being found. It means that for criminals who left their DNA behind, the passage of time is no longer a friend. The past is no longer a safe place to hide. Evidence that was collected 50 years ago can now be used to create a genetic map that leads directly to the killer's doorstep, or at least to his family's. It tells us that no case is ever truly hopeless. The answers may just be waiting for the science to catch up. And as technology continues to evolve, who knows what other secrets the past is waiting to tell us? What does it mean when a case is finally solved after so many years? For the families of the victims, it is a moment of profound and complicated relief. For decades, they have lived in a state of limbo, trapped between grief and the endless aching question of why and who. They have attended parole hearings for other criminals hoping for news. They have marked anniversaries not of a death, but of a disappearance. The lack of an ending, of a final chapter, prevents the healing process from ever truly beginning. It is an open wound that time refuses to close. Finding the truth doesn't erase the pain, but it can change its shape. When an arrest is made, it is like a great weight has been lifted. The uncertainty is gone. The questions finally have answers. For the first time, families can look at a face and know this is the person responsible for their sorrow. They can sit in a courtroom and hear the story of what happened, as painful as it may be. The legal process provides a structure, a finality that was missing for so long. A guilty verdict, a prison sentence. These are tangible acts of accountability. They are a public declaration that the life of their loved one mattered, that their loss was not forgotten by the world. For the detectives, both retired and active, closing a cold case is the fulfillment of a long-held promise. To finally be the one to make that phone call, to tell a family that they have found the person responsible, is one of the most meaningful moments in a police officer's life, and for the community, a solved cold case can heal a collective wound. A serial killer like the Grim Sleeper or BTK doesn't just harm their victims, they terrorize an entire population. When the killer is revealed to be a neighbor, a co-worker, a seemingly ordinary man, it is both shocking and, in a strange way, relieving. The monster is no longer a faceless phantom. He is a man in handcuffs. Closing the case allows the community to finally close a dark chapter in its own history, to let go of the fear and to begin to trust again. So, we look back at these stories, these ghosts from the past who were finally given a name and these shadows who were finally brought into the light. What do they teach us? They teach us first and foremost about the incredible power of persistence. They show us that for every family that refuses to give up hope, there is a detective who refuses to close the file. For every question that hangs in the air, there is a scientist in a lab working to find a new way to get an answer. These cases are a testament to the human spirit's unwillingness to accept a mystery as permanent. They also show us a simple, profound truth. Every single life matters. The boy in the box was not a statistic or a forgotten headline. He was Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Suzanne Savakis was not just a Jane Doe, she had a family and a history that were stolen from her. Solving these cases is a powerful statement. It says that no matter how much time has passed, no matter how marginalized or forgotten a victim may have been in life, their story deserves an ending. It is a promise we make to one another as a society. We will not forget you. We will keep looking. These solved cases give hope to the thousands of families who are still waiting. They are a beacon in the dark, proof that the impossible can become possible. They show that a breakthrough can come from anywhere, at any time. A new technology, a guilty conscience, a lucky break. For those living in the limbo of an unsolved crime, these stories are a reason to keep believing that one day, they too will get the phone call they have been waiting for. It is a reminder that the search for justice has no expiration date. And so, the work continues. In evidence lockers and police stations across the country, there are countless other boxes, other files, other silent pieces of evidence. They are waiting for the right technology, the right detective, the right moment in time. The stories we have talked about today are not just tales of crime and punishment. They are stories of dedication, of innovation, and of a deep, abiding human need for the truth. They remind us that while justice can be delayed, it must never be denied. And the past, you see, is never truly past. It's just waiting to be understood.